Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links video. Today we're taking a look at the new, freshly released Transcendence Mirus Super Mini Box. Now, we've been expecting a Super Mini Box for a little while. I think realistically this is very overdue because the latest meta has been going on for quite a long time, even with a new box introduced and even with the two best decks hit. The best decks didn't really fall off. They were still just kind of the best decks in the game. So we're really hoping that this box has some sort of impact on the meta going forward. So let the cold world burn in searing flames, Ultra Illusion Supreme Dragon. So first off, we can take a look at our big shiny cards in the box, and the first is Illusion Strike Dragon Mirus. So we already knew that we were getting this card because we already had a leaked skill that did mention it. But Illusion Strike Dragon Mirus is a relatively okay card. So we have to send one level 7 or higher dragon monster from our hand to the graveyard, up to 2 face-up level 7 or lower monsters on your opponent's field lose 1500 attack until the end of this turn. This turn, if this card destroyed a monster by battle, it can make a second attack on a monster during that battle phase. So that effect is not bad. You can get a ton of damage in, weaken your opponent's board, clear it, and even potentially get a really good OTK play in. The only issues is obviously the requirement for this does require quite a steep cost of discarding a level 7 or higher dragon type monster, and the effect only works on level 7 and lower monsters, so it won't work on maximums and it won't work on just level 8 monsters in general. And when fusions come out, which we expect to come out sooner than later, it also won't work on most of those because they will typically be levels 8, 9 and occasionally 10. So Illusion Strike Dragon Mirus is okay. We do also have its leaked skill, which is okay. The main issue with this skill is that it has this little line at the bottom saying for the rest of this turn, half the battle damage you inflict from a battle involving your dark attribute level 7 monsters. So the idea behind this skill is to try and make Mirus a little bit more consistent by adding a dark attribute monster 2500 attack from your deck to your hand. This is usually going to be Steel Striking Dragon Metageus or Illusion Strike Dragon Mirus, but halving the damage you deal is kind of a big letdown. It means those big pressure turns aren't likely to kill your opponent, which can make this feel a little bit lackluster. I am still hoping that this consistency boost is enough to make the deck feel really, really strong. Again, we just really want to see a meta shakeup, but I'm not convinced just yet. So going on to the next card we're going to talk about, we have Melod. This is a new Psychic boss monster, and I know that everyone is always chomping at the bit for a new Psychic boss. 2400 attack is not the best. Obviously, we'd rather this thing at 25, but 24 is still pretty good. We can return one other face-up level 5 or higher monster from your field to the hand. Choose one face-down card on your opponent's field and shuffle it into the deck. If your life points are lower than your opponent's, you can add a level 1 Psychic-type normal monster from your graveyard to your hand. So the Psychic-type normal monster you're usually going to be adding is going to be Candy, because that's kind of a big combo piece for the deck in general. But what you would do with this in the physical version of the game is you would loop 2 copies of this card. Basically, we just try and plus as much as we can, so we just have so many cards in our hand, get out a Melod, summon out a second Melod, put the first one back in our hand, use its effect to get rid of one of your opponent's face-down cards, summon out the original one again, put the first one back in our hand again, and basically keep doing this as much as we can with the limited resources that we have, and just try and get rid of as many of our opponent's cards as possible. So Melod is probably the monster that has seen the most play, and typically is quite a strong card, and again, we are getting a skill to back this card up. So the skill lets us choose a Psychic monster on our field, change its level to 5, which means it will now be able to fulfill the requirement for our Melod. If it was a Candy, we can add a light attribute Psychic level 7 monster or jump up from our deck to our hand. So this is pretty good, right? If we do have that Candy, we can then add a light attribute Psychic level 7 monster. Now, because it's light, it can't actually be the Melod itself because Melod is dark, or we can get the jump up to basically facilitate getting our Melod out. So there is some potential here, and I really do hope that it ends up being good. So the next up is one I think that caught a lot of people off guard, and this is Wilhel the Mega Monarch. So Monarchs are quite an interesting one. The archetype in Rush has all the original Monarchs from Master Rule as legend cards, and the brand new Monarchs are split between Cyberse and Galaxy monsters. So it looks like we're getting the Cyberse half of the Monarch monsters, but not the Galaxy half just yet. But we can tribute this card in attack position by tributing one face-up level 5 or higher monster with 1000 defense. So that's already quite an interesting little effect. We can get out this 2400 attack monster, 1 tribute cheaper if we tribute a tribute monster that has exactly 1000 defense. And if we take a look at what those monsters are, obviously we could tribute another copy of itself. We have D and Keto, which would be eligible. The new D and Keto, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Lightning Bolt Condor. There's a lot of interesting higher level monsters, but we're not realistically going to be using those. Realistically, we're going to try and use level 5s and 6s, so we could use 7's Road Witch. Corner is relatively generic and does have 1000 defense, so that is an option. There's also the Gravity Pressed Dragon, the other Wilhel, which we'll be talking about in a minute, as it's also in this box. And then we start getting into some of the weaker cards like Mask of Volos and Sonic Attacker. I think realistically we're going to want to be tributing off the Wilhel and the Torna. They seem like the most useful and most generic cards to be used for this effect. But during the turn that we tribute summon this card in attack position, your opponent chooses one card on their field and you destroy it. So your opponent gets to choose the card that gets popped, which is a little bit shaky, but again, depending on what they've got on their board, they might not have a lot of good choices to pick. For example, if they don't have any back row, they have to get rid of a monster, and that means if we get 3 monsters out, we now get that line in to hit them directly. So Wilhel is a pretty cool boss monster. Next up, we're going to go to the super rares, and the first one is another Aqua monster, Brickphone Nyan Nyan. Now, I've personally been waiting for this card for a very long time. 1200 attack, level 4. Okay, not too bad. During the turn, we have normal summon this card. We can place 1 card from our hand on the bottom of our deck. So -1ing is not the best, but again, we do recoup that with the effect. 1 face-up monster on your opponent's field loses 500 attack until the end of this turn. Then you can add 1 level 7 or higher Aqua-type monster from your graveyard to your hand. So this is really good because, again, we can get back our Diankito or our new Diankito that we're talking about in a minute. So being able to weaken one of our opponent's monsters and then take back one of our boss monsters from the graveyard is actually really, really good. And obviously, it would be really nice if we didn't have to minus when we did this, so that we could basically get a 3+1. This card instead does break even, so it's not crazy good, but it's still a really strong card, and I think Aqua could actually be a relatively strong deck going forward. And now we'll just talk about the other big Aqua card in the box, and that is Diankito the Security Master. So this effect doesn't come up too often. In the physical game, you would see Diankito see a bit of play, especially into things like maximum decks, because hitting a maximum piece out of your opponent's hand is generally really good. But it's still got 2500 attack, which again is a fantastic stat, and we want this in here just to be another boss monster. We can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard, look at your opponent's hand, choose 1 card, send it to the graveyard, and if you sent a level 7 or higher monster to the graveyard, we can gain 1000 life points. So whereas the other Diankito will just always give you that 1000, this one will sometimes give you that 1000, but will always rip a card. So it's kind of debatable which one is better. Obviously, if you're able to always hit a level 7 and higher, it's, no question, Security Master is always better. And being able to get a card out of your opponent's hand can be good, but also you could fix their bricked hand. So it's a little bit awkward to play this card correctly. But realistically, we want this card because it is just another level 8, 2500 attack Aqua monster. Next up, we have Spellcaster Support in 7's Road Sorcerer. So, it's a level 4, 1300 attack Dark Spellcaster. We can send 3 face-up monsters from our field to the graveyard. Now, notably, these can be any monsters. These don't have to be spellcasters that we're sending to the graveyard. Then we can special summon a level 7 or lower Spellcaster monster from our graveyard face-up to our field. So that's already quite expensive, but we do get out any Spellcaster basically from our graveyard. If we special summon the 7's Road Magician for this effect, we can special summon 1 7's Road Witch from our graveyard face up to our field. So when you think about this realistically, if you were to summon those from your hand, you would have to normal summon, tribute over for Witch, activate Witch effect by discarding a card, and then summon out the actual 7's Road from your hand. So that's quite a nice little 4-card combo that gets you out your 7's Road Witch, gets out your 7's Road Magician, hunky-dory. With this card, we could basically spend 3 cards to accomplish the same thing. The only difference would be that our Witch wouldn't be activating its effect, so it wouldn't be getting that little power boost that it gets from using its effect, the extra 400 attack. Unless, of course, we had another 7's Road Magician in our hand, at which point we could also summon that out with Witch and get out all 3 of those monsters and be a really big tempo play. So 7's Road Sorcerer is a really strong card, and I think a lot of people did underestimate this card in the physical game, but it did see quite a lot of play. So taking a look at the rest of the cards in the box, we start to see some quite interesting inclusions, such as the Dark Magic Curtain. So this is Dark Magician support, which maybe then does hint as to why we did get that 1000 Knives. So we can pay 700 life points, excavate the top 4 cards of your deck, you can choose up to 2 excavated Dark Magician and or Dark Magician Girl, add them to your hand, place the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. So this can potentially +2, which is quite nice. But we do already have the skill, which does let us search out the Dark Magician, so we don't necessarily need specifically the Dark Magician itself. So we're basically using this to try and dig for Dark Magician Girl, which then either we can use as a Dark Magician Girl, or we can use it to get to Dark Magician, etc, etc. Now, Dark Magic Curtain is a bit of a weird one, because in the physical game, this card very rarely did anything, but we were playing with 40 card decks. With 30 card decks, Dark Magician's Curtain might actually hit monsters more often, which does make it a little bit better. Obviously, we don't really want to use this effect unless we're guaranteed to hit something. We don't really want to leave this thing in attack mode and pass to our opponent. So it's an interesting card. I can't say for sure if this card is going to suddenly be really good, but I'm very excited to test out the Dark Magician stuff. I think, again, if we had 3 copies of Thousand Knives, then the Dark Magician deck would actually be a really powerful deck. It would possibly even be a tier 1 deck. I think with only 1 copy and no way to recycle it, basically the deck is just 2500 beta spam with the ability to pop 1 monster 1 time in the game, which I just don't think is enough. But again, I would love to be wrong. So next up we have Zeus, the Wisdom Vasal. So this is more Monarch support. So 800 attack, 1000 defense, not the greatest. But during the turn you normal summon this card, we can shuffle 2 monsters with 1000 defense from our graveyard into the deck. Your opponent sets 1 spell card from their graveyard to their field. Then you can add a level 5 or higher monster with 1000 defense from your graveyard to your hand. Now notably, we do also have another Monarch coming out, which is a 1000 monster that's level 5, so that is a good target for this. But more importantly, we do need monsters that have 1000 defense. So if we go back over to Duel Links meta, we can see that again we do have these high level monsters that have 1000 defense, but if we go down to the lower level monsters that have 1000 defense, we have Essel. So if we just play Essel in this deck, we can just again shuffle it back in to use a requirement. We also have things like Piercing Samurai, which might not be as useful because chances are we're not going to have warriors in the deck. But there are also some other cards available, such as the Talismanic Warriors. We do have Speedy Performer, which is kind of generic. We do have the new Draft Tannin, which is also kind of generic. So there are actually quite a lot of options to shuffle back into our deck to use this requirement. But the logic is that we'll use this card to set a spell card to our opponent's field, and then ideally already have access to this Will Hell, or use its effect to take back this Will Hell, because this Will Hell is pretty good specifically into that situation. So 2000 attack, level 5. During the turn, you tribute summon this card in attack position, look at 1 face down spell card on your opponent's field, then if it's a spell card, which again it will be if we've used our Vassal, so it will be 100% accurate, we can destroy it, which is actually pretty good. Now, only being 2000 attack does kind of suck, but the logic here is that we will summon out our Vassal, then summon out Will Hell, then tribute Will Hell into our other Will Hell, and be able to go straight up to that 2400 attack monster. Now again, 2400 is not great, right? We'd much rather it be 2500, but it is a combo that we do now have access to. And next up, we have what we predicted, and this is Night Vision, the Phantom Pigeon. Now, the only problem we're seeing with this card is we did not get any of the new trap cards to go along with it, which is a little bit yikes. But this card is still okay, right? 2200 attack. If we have a trap card in our graveyard, we can send the top 2 cards of a deck to the graveyard. This card gains attack equal to the number of trap cards in your graveyard times 200 until the end of this turn. Then if you have 5 or more trap cards in your graveyard, inflict 1000 damage to your opponent. So this is kind of like Seven's Road Magician, but a bit worse, right? So we need trap cards, which we're not going to be playing an absolute ton of realistically, right? We can't realistically put more than like 10. Seems kind of the upper limit, maybe 11 if we're really pushing it. And none of those trap cards are really going to be burn traps, except for Combustion Crisis. So it's going to be a little bit awkward to make this work. But we still can, again, gain that attack boost to attack over a threat, and ideally get that extra 1000 burn in. And one thing we will say is that Extra Spice was underestimated when it first came out. Vast Vulcan was underestimated when it first came out. All of these burn effects are showing that they can hold their own. So I wouldn't be surprised if Night Vision the Phantom Pigeon actually did become a winner of this box. But again, we have very limited traps to actually make it work super efficiently right now, but I do think this is one of the ones to keep an eye on. And next we have Righteous Dragon, which is a reprint, so yay, Righteous Dragon's here. This card was originally in Steel Kaleido Mirror, so I don't know why we're reprinting it already, but the Righteous Dragon's here, guys. Then we have Psychic Burial. And Psychic Burial is an interesting spell card. We can pay 1000 life points, which again is a lot steeper cost in Duel Links because we have 2000 less life. We can send the top 2 cards of the deck to the graveyard. Then if your opponent has 3 monsters on their field, you can send 1 card from the top of your deck to the graveyard. The idea is to try and turbo stuff into your graveyard. I don't realistically think this card's going to see a ton of play. This card did see a little bit of play in the physical game, but like not a ton. I'm not a huge fan of this card personally, but again, there are some decks that want to have specific stuff in the graveyard, so maybe there's something here, but off the top of my head, I can't think of a deck I would want to put this card in. And then we have Imprisoned Beautiful Witch. So we've been saying for a long time that we've been really wanting to get some Aqua Trap cards, and here we go, an Aqua Trap card. And it's probably the worst one. So, jokes aside, this card is not too bad, but it's very unimpactful unless you're playing against very specific things. So when your opponent normal summons a monster while you have a face-up level 8 or higher Aqua-type monster on your field, we can choose up to 5 monsters in our opponent's graveyard, shuffle them into the deck. If your opponent has a face-up Spellcaster-type monster on their field, you can then choose another 5 additional monsters in their graveyard and shuffle them into the deck. So obviously this is really good against 7's Rogue Magician. We can get rid of 10 of their cards in their graveyard, put them back in the deck, which I guess does weaken that 7's Rogue Magician. And hurting your opponent's graveyard can actually be quite good. I mean, right now, Mirror Innovator is obviously a really strong card that wants to have very specific machines in the graveyard. We have things like Talismanic Sealero, which we can turn off with this. But this card, when activated, doesn't impact the board at all. Doesn't even affect anyone's life points. I'm really not the biggest fan of a card like this. This is kind of what I would put in the side deck, typically, and not really a main deck card. And even right now, I don't know if I would even side deck this card. It's just not doing enough. Then we have Flare Sorcerer, so another 1500 Spellcaster, this time for the fire variety. And again, we will get eventually all the different attributes. It's nice to have. The fire Spellcaster slot has been a bit weird. We've seen people experiment by putting things like Gazelle in their deck, which isn't even a Spellcaster. Spark Cart Scale being limited 3, again, does kind of limit that card's playability a little bit. Yeah, Flare Sorcerer is nice to have. And speaking of 1500 beaters, we have Sylphidra, which is finally a second 1500 dragon beater, so maybe dragons can keep up with the other decks that have their big beaters. Then we have Canaan, the security guard. This is just Canaan, but dark. 1400 attack is fine. And then Guarding Mermaid, which again is just a 1200 attack aqua monster. There's not really much to say about it. Then we have Blasting Bird, which is actually pretty cool. So we can reveal 2 spell or trap cards from our hand to our opponent. This turn, this face-up card can be treated as 2 tributes to the tribute summon of a winged beast monster in attack position. So that means that you can use this card to summon out Volcondor. It also means you can use it to summon out Ice Zark, as well as the brand new Night Vision. There is actually quite a few winged beasts that you can play this card with, so I'm quite happy to see this card get released, as it's not just support for one single deck. Then we have a reprint in Celbrontosaurus. I'm not really sure why we got so many reprints in here. Psychic Introduction is another reprint. And then we're back to Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror-Gears. So there is one other thing to take note of about these brand new cards, and that is that some of these cards will be limited restricted, and we also do have a new bundle coming. So we head over to the game, we can see that all 3 of Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror-Gears, Wilhel the Mega Monarch, and Can Melody are all limited 3. Because again, Konami loves putting things on limited 3 because we're not allowed to play anything with Dragius. So this is very awkward because Psychic already have a limit 3, which obviously is very detrimental to their strategy. Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror-Gears to limit 3, I don't think matters too much. Steel Striking Dragon Meta-Gears is not currently limit 3, so we can still play it alongside that. Wilhel being limit 3, I think does very much limit its application. Again, I'm really not sure where we're putting Wilhel, but Can Melody limit 3 really does hurt because Maginical Miracle is also limit 3, so not feeling super happy about that. But if we scroll down a bit, we can see that we're getting the new bundle, which does contain Burst Stream of Destruction. So for anyone that doesn't know, Burst Stream of Destruction, as long as you have a face-up Blue Eyes on your field, which again, Blue Eyes Bright can become Blue Eyes, we can destroy all monsters in our opponent's field, but then we cannot attack with Blue Eyes that turn. So the logic, ideally, would be that you would summon out your Blue Eyes, activate Burst Stream, wipe your opponent's field, and then tribute over it for something, and then just attack with 3 monsters and try and kill your opponent. So there is actually potentially something going on there. But if we come down here, even though we're only getting 1 copy, it will be on the limit 1 list. So this doesn't really matter because the only other card on limit 1 right now, I believe, is Sword and Shield. So unless we're planning to play both of those cards, it doesn't really make a huge difference. But it is very funny that Burst Stream of Destruction is going to be at 1 copy and limited 1, the same as Sword and Shield. So what do we think of this box overall? I think it's fine. I don't think the boxes particularly stand out. I think the new Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror-Gears with its skill could be okay. I'm not convinced it's going to be able to be outperforming machines, but you never know. It is arguably quite good into that deck because the machine deck doesn't play any level 8s, is all level 7 and lower, which means the Illusion Strike Dragon Mirror-Gears deck might just be able to bully it out of the way. We're not really sure what we're doing with the Cyburst Monarchs, I don't really think you'd play them in the Cyburst list. I'm really not sure where we're going to put the Monarchs yet, but there's going to be a home somewhere. Can Melody, and with the new skill, I think is potentially quite good. I'm a little bit disappointed that Magical Miracle and Can Melody are both limit 3. That really is going to hurt the consistency of that deck, but it is what it is. We then have 7's Road Sorcerer, which I think, again, is a relatively powerful card. I think this card will see a bit of play, and especially as we go forward into the future, is going to get even better. Dark Magician's Curtain. Again, I'm looking forward to testing the Dark Magician stuff. I just, from personal experience of playing this card in the physical version, I'm not a big fan of this card. But again, with those 10 less cards in the deck, its effect might be a bit more consistent. Keto and a lot of the other Aqua stuff, such as Brickphone Nian Yan, I do think these two cards are going to be really, really good for the Aqua strategy, and I think that could be one of the stronger decks going forward. And we get more Monarch stuff, which again is fine. Night Vision, again, I think could be a big winner from here. So from my perspective, I think the Winged Beasts, and specifically Night Vision, could be one of the strongest decks from here. I think Aqua is going to be really good. I think the Mirus could be really good anti-machine, but is not going to be very good into Cyburst, which I think could create a few issues there. And then I think the Psychic stuff has potential, but I mean, Psychic always has potential. They always have skills that read busted, and then because of all the limitations slapped on them, they never get to do anything. But fingers crossed, this is their time to shine. But that is my box review. Thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you next time.